Welcome to the Astro Psyche. This is your weekly astrology forecast for June 9th through the 15th. And this week there are a lot of themes around expansion, around looking at the potential, the ideal versus the reality. And this week there is this strong core theme around expanding into your potential and sort of pushing against what feels like restriction versus potential realities. This week we have a full moon in Sagittarius, Mars is squaring Uranus, and Jupiter is changing signs, which is very important. This only happens once a year. My name is Shauna McGrath. I'm a depth psychotherapist and an astrologer, and I'm so honored to share the astrology of this week with you from a depth psychological perspective. So, we're actually going to start with Mercury this week because Mercury is aspecting several important planets. Mercury is a symbol of our mind, our thought process, our communication, and Mercury is a symbol of transmission, of moving from one thing to another or bringing, transitioning, transmuting an idea, a concept, a phenomenon from one thing to another. And so Mercury is really about carrying communication and how we make sense of things analytically, logically, spatially, symbolically. Mercury is so connected to stories and myth and how myth and metaphor help us understand and make sense of our reality. And so this week, Mercury is actually making a square to a cluster of planets and points. So Mercury is squaring Neptune, Mercury is squaring Saturn, Mercury is squaring the goddess asteroid Ceres. And so this is because Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, freshly in Cancer. Mercury moved into Cancer just recently in the last week or so, and it is making this square aspect to Saturn, Neptune, and Ceres in the sign of Aries. And so this is a cardinal energy. Both Cancer and Aries are cardinal in that they are about initiating, they are about action, they are about beginning something new. And so there's some oomph, some dynamic energy via this being a square aspect, which shows a bit of tension and where we're trying to integrate two very different things into one situation, which is the square. And then also the cardinal energy has this momentum, this energy behind it. And so I want you to know. So, actually, I will say we have quite a few very dynamic, very energetic aspects this week. And so you might be feeling energized, riled. There's like a little bit of tension whenever we have many squares and oppositions this week, like we do. And the beauty of this is that squares and oppositions tend to propel us into action. They sort of provide a calling to do or act or to think about things in a way that maybe we haven't before, that maybe the thought or the idea, in this case, very much Mercury, the thought, the idea, the concept has sort of maybe been simmering and now it is thrust forward, so to speak. So Mercury is also shedding light on the paradox of Saturn and Neptune as a combination together. So, Saturn and Neptune, over the last year particularly, have really been traveling very close together in the zodiac. They will make an exact conjunction next year in February 2026. So that's sort of the peak of their contact together. And also, this long term transit of Saturn and Neptune together is something that we've been feeling into over the last year or so and the next year going forward, which is this theme around the vision, the creative potential of Neptune. Neptune asks us to imagine, to feel, to intuit, to allow for a sense of channeling what is possible. Neptune is also very connected to the symbol of the womb, this like full spiritual, emotional merging experience. And this is also why Neptune is very much correlated to enmeshment or psychological fusion, lack of boundaries, um, getting lost in a moment, getting lost in altered states of consciousness. This is all very Neptune, but at the core, Neptune is about a fundamental desire to merge, to go back to that womb like experience. And we all have a variety of different calling or feeling a desire for this experience. Folks that have Neptune keyed into their birth chart in particular can sort of experience this either consciously or unconsciously, this desire to merge. And so that is all these things that I'm describing are all very ethereal, it's all very feely. You can't really pin it down very much. And that is the beauty of Neptune, is that it reminds us that there are components of reality that are illusionary always. And even when we think we have something pinned down and figured out, there's something new that opens up for us. And then Saturn, in contrast, is about very much the complete opposite direction. Saturn is about the tangible, the finiteness. Saturn says, in this reality, we only have so much time, energy. Saturn reminds us of our mortality. And that can be, especially when we're feeling the Neptune call, that can be experienced as constraining, confining, disappointing. Um, there's grief in the Saturn experience, and also it's very clarifying to have Saturn present, because when we only have so much time and space, we can say, this time and space is very precious, and I want to use it for the things that I feel called towards most. Now, of course, I think a part of the combination of Saturn Neptune is this parsing out of what feels pressing, what feels real, what you actually want to do, what you want to imagine, what you want to create with your precious energy. And so I'm really elaborating on this in particular this week because we have both, actually this week, both Mercury and Jupiter are squaring this Saturn-Neptune situation that I'm describing here. And so it's like Saturn and Neptune, they move so slow, they're together, so they're kind of traveling, and they're kind of like the landscape in a painting where we see it and it's not necessarily the focal point. But what happens when Mercury and Jupiter, these more quickly moving planets, aspect Saturn and Neptune, they bring our attention to this landscape, to this background, and they bring the background into the foreground in a very particular way. In this case, this is Mercury, the mind, the thought process, our conceptions, our thinking, our communication. And so this may come from within via this burst of ideas, this mental um, this mental like figuring out. It may come from outside. It may come through a clarification of information that maybe simultaneously feels like really full of potential while also clarifying at the same time. So when we break these out separately, Mercury to Neptune is this highly imaginative, highly creative, really just being moved by what's possible and being able to create, and particularly um, anything that involves the arts or written or spoken or thoughts or ideas. This is very Mercury Neptune. In contrast, Mercury to Saturn as an individual unit and pair is very much about the practical thoughts, the practical realities, what is working, what is not working. I think with Mercury-Saturn, or actually a couple things I want to say here. I think with Mercury-Neptune as a pair, the challenge sometimes can be that we get confused with our intuition. We're like feeling something, and intuition, I don't know if this is your experience, but sometimes I think that we can have an intuition about something, but it's not entirely clear what that feeling is. Maybe like you're around someone and you're like, "Oh, I feel something is off with this person." And you don't quite know what it is, but you feel something. And sometimes we can verify what it is that we're feeling, sometimes not. And so Mercury Neptune, particularly in a square, can sometimes default when we don't have enough information. It can default into confusion or a fear response, and sort of that imagination running away with itself. In contrast, Mercury-Saturn is more of this practical point, and Saturn is so much connected to our confidence and our feeling that we have the ability to move through the world and to do the hard things. And so when Mercury-Saturn is here, if it is exacerbating, it can have the potential to ping into any self-confidence, self-esteem, or maybe like where we're feeling a not enoughness in some way. And so I'm sharing this with you because I want you to really be watching where your mind is going. And if you go into fear, or you go into I'm not enough, I am not, you know, qualified or good enough in some way, we know, okay, like something is happening here, and there's some possible psychological complex that's getting activated as symbolized by these planets. And then we can bring a sense of wondering and curiosity and compassion, and sort of wondering, okay, like what is possibly bringing up this feeling or thought. Now, Mercury is also this week making a square to the asteroid goddess Ceres. And Ceres, so the asteroid goddesses, I think of them as sort of complementary to the planets. They bring a particular storyline. In this case, this is the myth of Ceres. Ceres was the mother of Persephone, and Ceres had a really hard time when Persephone went down into the underworld, when Persephone left and became the queen of her own domain. And there are many different stories of Persephone. I like to emphasize that there is a story where Persephone goes down into the underworld herself of her own accord. And it's just her down there as the queen, which is a much more empowering storyline. And we think of how in this myth, the mother, Ceres, responded. She was grief stricken. She made the land barren. She just hardcore grieved, and it was very difficult for her to have this separation. And so Ceres as an asteroid is a symbol of rites of initiation when we leave the home, either literally or emotionally in some way, when we separate from our family system, and all of the complicated feelings that come along with that. It's really, I think there are several planets that we could say are symbols of a call to differentiate, and Ceres is one of those. Differentiation is when we claim our own ideas and thoughts and ways of being, and we claim ourselves while also staying in relationship to others. There's this emotional separation that's created. And so Mercury is also pinging into Ceres here, so there might be themes around what feels true for you versus what is expected of you, family pressure, these kinds of things. Mercury is also making a sextile to Venus, which I like. I think that brings in a little helpful support and um, connecting with beauty or relationships in a way that feels helpful and supportive to you. So, this brings us to Venus because Venus is also doing some things this week. So, Venus is in Taurus. It's making a square to Pluto. And so we talked about this, I'm pretty sure last week, maybe the week before, I can't quite remember, but we've been feeling into this Venus Pluto energy already because when Venus moved into Taurus in the last week or so, that meant it immediately activated Venus square Pluto. And this week that aspect is exact. So it's more present, it's more strong, the volume is higher, the sensation is more full on, so to speak. So Venus Pluto is about diving deep into relational dynamics. Venus is relationships, beauty, aesthetics, the things that we love, the things that we're attracted to, the things that turn us on, the things that turn us off. It's so much around the experience of beauty and pleasure, and that relationships are also a part of that. Now, Pluto is about exposing the hidden, exposing the unconscious. And this process of unconscious material coming into our awareness, no matter how slight, often feels a bit confrontational at an internal level, but it can feel cathartic, and it usually increases our sense of feeling whole, feeling more vital, because we're sort of integrating, or we're integrating more parts of ourselves that have been rejected or marginalized or cut off in some way. And so Venus Pluto is a beautiful opportunity to become more aware of relationship dynamics that have maybe been unconscious or um, that have maybe been shoved away. And we get to look at what's happening and how we're feeling, and we get to be really honest with ourselves about what our experience is, and we get to collect back parts of self. I think so much sometimes that um, psychotherapy, reflective work, healing work really is complemented by the healing process that involves um, the integration of, we could call, like, soul parts. It's sort of like in psychotherapy terms we may call this parts work or family systems work, where you're constantly saying, oh, like, this is something about me that I kind of didn't even realize this is a way that I am, and because it was um, necessary to reject this way of being in some way. So um, because Pluto involves themes of power and control and resources and autonomy, those themes also may be present in whatever is coming up around relational dynamics. And this can be very direct and more extreme and profound. Like, the nature of Pluto is an intensity here, intensity of feeling in particular. It might be more subtle. It could be simply realizing that there are things, subtle things that you do to try to modify yourself so that you can control someone else's experience. That's like a very classic Plutonian response, is like, um, okay, I need to be a certain way so that this person will respond to me in a way that I need to, so that I make sure that they're okay and then I can be okay. And this is really a survival instinct. And sometimes when we do anything repetitively over time, Pluto is also a symbol of repetition. Um, whenever we do anything repetitively over time, eventually we may realize that dynamic has side effects, and sometimes it's fine, it's worth it, and sometimes we want to change things, we want to tweak things. And I think especially with Mercury connecting into Saturn and Neptune and Ceres, like we talked about, there's this kind of like coming to terms with what maybe has been an illusion as well via this Saturn Pluto. Now, Venus in Taurus is also opposite the asteroid goddess Vesta. So we have this T square of Venus, Pluto, and Vesta. Vesta's symbol is the flame, the hearth. Vesta in the mythology is a symbol of the eternal flame, and the eternal flame and the hearth in that organizing principle around a home, around a family, and we could say here psychologically around the self. So Vesta sort of has this feeling of the sun in some ways, and that it is this inner fire, this inner vitality. Whereas the sun is more of a symbol of the ego. I think of Vesta as more of this quiet inner vitality, this quiet truth. There is this constant tending that Vesta requires. And so I think that Venus and Vesta inspires us to find our home in relationship, to find what feels orienting, what feels true, and how we can feel centered in relationship, how we can feel centered as we're having deep and meaningful experiences, which is what Venus Pluto is all about. Okay, and as always, love to hear and really encourage you to sit with what's coming up as I'm talking about this, because whenever you're listening, we're typically already in it. And so nothing happens in a vacuum. There's always this uh, leading in and one thing leading to the next. Okay. What else is happening? You might be asking. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you often in these weekly videos, and I encourage you to just let it wash over you. That's very much the way that I imagine you listening to this, is that you're just taking it in, and whatever needs to get into your consciousness will, and anything else can either slide off or it can go in for contemplation later. Okay, so let's talk about Mars making a square to Uranus. So Mars is in Leo, fixed fire sign. There's like this intense strength to Mars and Leo. And then Uranus is in Taurus. And this combination is also a square, so there's a bit of tension here. This is really about liberating your passion, being in your physicality, being in your advocacy, being in your righteous anger, being in your no, being in your boundaries. Uranus has this liberating, freeing, spontaneous quality to it. Uranus is all about questioning, like, wait, why the fuck am I doing it this way? Like, why have I been doing, and maybe it's not that extreme. Maybe it's like, oh, like I've been doing it this way all this time, and I don't feel like doing that or that doesn't work anymore. Or, oh my gosh, there's this brand new idea or opportunity, or there's something different that is available. Uranus is all about being open to new experiences, often in a way that feels unburdening. And so I know it is a square, and I know it's Mars Uranus, and I know that many astrologers will have maybe like a more alarmist sort of slant on this particular aspect. I've heard some people say this is like an accident prone kind of aspect, and that is because Mars is about physical action and movement, and Uranus is about the unexpected. So, of course, yes, if you're moving very quickly and you're not paying attention, that's usually when accidents are more prone to happen. So if that is something that you already have challenges around, then yeah, like maybe it makes sense to slow down, to do your best to make sure that you're acting with intentionality. Um, what I think, though, I find that we can get more from contemplating the astrology from this, like, okay, what is it actually invoking in us? What is it symbolizing? What is this? Because astrology really is just about the feeling of a period of time. It's saying, like, okay, this time, this cycle, this particular place or moment in time, there is a quality of experience. And in this case, a part of the quality of experience of this week is Mars Uranus, which is about unburdening and freeing your Mars quality, which is your directness, your passion, your physicality, your ability to take action, your ability to fight for things. And so there's a lot of energy behind this. And I don't know. I'm really curious how this may manifest for you. I can see how, particularly if you are a person that has struggled with mm, prioritizing, or if you're feeling burdened in some way, this might be a week where there is this shedding of something, shedding of heaviness. And I quite like that for you. Um, it's sort of ironic in that this sense of freedom may involve embracing, or at the very least paying attention to, your anger, your agitation, or simply a dislike for something, which is all very Mars. Mars is a protective function. Our no is a protective function. And um, it may also simply involve movement or physical activity in some way. Uh, Now, also, Mars is making a trine, a helpful, easeful trine aspect to Chiron. And so I think this also means that there is this element of channeling your power, and your passions can evoke a healing experience. Okay, what else do I have here to share with you? Okay, yes. Okay, you might be like, Shauna, what about the full moon? Yes, the full moon is also happening this week. So we have a full moon in Sagittarius on Wednesday, June 11th at 12:44 a.m. Pacific time. So depending on where you are in the world, it might be June 11th, June 12th. It's exact at 20 degrees of Sagittarius. And so this full moon is very Jupiterian, and we're going to talk more about Jupiter in a moment. Sagittarius has this quality of expansiveness, of big picture thinking. It's very philosophical. It's like very growth oriented, very much an optimistic kind of energy. Both Sagittarius and Jupiter are also about receiving help and support from other people that are in a position to help and support you. So, also with the full moon, there is this feeling feeling a culmination of energy or activities. And in this case, this may be around things that, so wherever Sagittarius is in your birth chart, whatever house is ruled by Sagittarius, it may involve culmination or growth, or a feeling of expansiveness around that area of life. It may be this culmination around things that began at any level of cycle involving this full moon in Sagittarius. So that might mean something that began, like culmination around something that began during this monthly lunar cycle, that happened starting with the new moon that happened in late May this year, just last month. Maybe there's a culmination around something that began in the last 6 months at the new moon in Sagittarius in November of 2024. Or maybe a culmination around things in the last year since our last full moon in Sagittarius in May of 2024. So there's always this multiple layers of growing and shifting and changing and transformation. And this cycle, this lunar cycle, shows that there is a sense of blossoming or blooming or culminating that's happening in your life. Now, a couple of interesting notes about this full moon as well is it's ruled by Jupiter. And it's interesting that this full moon is happening the same week that Jupiter is moving from Gemini into Cancer. And so we're going to talk about that in a second. But there is this sort of transition. And it's kind of interesting because the sun is in Gemini and Jupiter is moving away from the sun into a brand new sign. And Jupiter in Cancer has this quality of wanting to begin new things, expanding into a brand new area of life. So, because Jupiter is fresh in Cancer, it also feels like this full moon maybe is a culmination, but it also feels new and fresh and exciting. There's some sort of new quality to it more than simply a culmination of things. Also, what's cool is the moon in Sagittarius is in mutual reception with Jupiter. So this means that the moon and Jupiter are in each other's ruling signs. And this doesn't always happen. When this happens, it means that these planets can work together in a way where it's kind of like they're holding hands or they're skipping together. There's this flow, that there's this sort of like braiding together feeling. And this is because the moon is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Cancer, and Cancer is ruled by the moon. So they're bound together even more so this particular moon. And also, I want to say about this full moon, it's making a trine aspect to both Mars and Chiron. And that feels really important. So trines don't really require anything of us. They're this easy, harmonious, flowing energy. And we talked about Mars, right? So there's something here around tapping into your energy, your physicality, your movement, your directness, your boundaries that can flow more freely. And that there is a healing experience to have here via Chiron. Now, also, this does mean that this full moon is indirectly connecting into the Mars square Uranus. And so it also kind of feels like there's a little bit of maybe an unexpected quality that this full moon is bringing forward. And so I think this just adds to the general buzzy, exciting, expansive kind of feeling. Okay, let's talk about Jupiter. So Jupiter changes signs once a year. This happens on Monday, June 9th at 2:02 p.m. Pacific time. And Jupiter is the function of expansion, growth, optimism, support from others. It's a symbol of philosophy or big picture thinking. And so this function of expansion, growth, optimism, etc., shifts from Gemini, which is very much about like exploring multiple possibilities all at the same time and moving from one thing to another. It shifts into this more feeling based, intuitive, and initiatory kind of energy, which is Cancer. So Cancer is a cardinal water sign. It's about starting things from feeling. Cancer also has uh, this quality of protection, of like really being moved by the intuition or the feeling function. And also kind of doing things in a way that are, I don't know if I want to say indirect, but there's like more of a sense of smooth calmness with Jupiter versus Gemini. Gemini is very quick. It's an air sign, it's a mutable sign. It's one of the most fluid movementy kind of signs. And then Cancer is this water, it kind of like slows things down and soothes things a bit. Jupiter is also exalted in Cancer, and so this simply means that in the ancient astrology, they considered Jupiter in Cancer to be incredibly benefic, incredibly helpful. I think that sometimes a planet in an exalted sign like Jupiter in Cancer can sometimes feel like sometimes, yes, it can make things more effortless. And also sometimes it just simply makes that planet be experienced as like more. And so Jupiter's already the planet of more. And so it can kind of feel like a big energy. It might feel a little like there's a too muchness to it. I think that is possible, particularly when we have a full moon in general. There's a feeling of too muchness. And so, you know, do what you need to do to take care of yourself to feel like um, you have the capacity to deal with the now, to deal with what is on your plate now. Um, I also want to say important to consider what planet, or sorry, to consider what sign. Okay, back it up here. um, Jupiter is changing signs, but it's also changing houses in your birth chart. So, Jupiter, this planet of growth and optimism, has been transiting through Gemini in your birth chart. And so, again, I think that this is like a side tangent here. We often, as astrologers, talk about Jupiter as being the benefic and being growth and optimism, expansion, all the good things. It's like all good, right? But every planet, every point, every situation has a shadow element or an unconscious element. And for Jupiter, that is too much, too muchness. It's being overwhelmed, it's being consumed, it's being like flooded, so to speak. And so Jupiter's been going through this house for you of Gemini, wherever Gemini is in your birth chart. I don't know, maybe it's the fifth house of creativity, maybe it's the 10th house of career, maybe it's the first house of you and yourself and your physical body. This is changing. And so Jupiter is moving into Cancer and it's going to be transiting the house in your birth chart that is ruled by Cancer. So this is a big change. And I think of it as marking the beginning of a new journey around how you are growing, learning, gaining wider perspectives, and really your relationship to growth and expansion. Now, another component of this is that Jupiter moving into Cancer is also immediately marking its square to Saturn and Neptune, but it's exact square to Saturn this week. So this kind of adds to this like conundrum of making something visionary and philosophical grounded in reality. Jupiter is the broader perspective, the enthusiasm, the yesness of things, and Saturn is the long term, practical, step by step, daily experience of things. And these two coming together is about invoking a desire to create something grand. And I think that Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter square Saturn is really about holding space for the big picture as well as the minutia and the mundane day to day. Okay, so I'm going to pull some tarot cards for you, and I know it's a lot. Um, and I also have some reflection questions for you to sit with this week as I'm shuffling. So, number one, how can you hold space for the full potential of something, of yourself, as well as the reality of a situation? How can you hold space for both the potential as well as the reality? And number two, what is your heart saying right now? Just really tapping into that Venus Pluto, connecting with what your heart is saying. And number three, how are you being called to expand, to grow, to individuate? How are you being called towards that expansive feeling? Okay, so if you're not already, I invite you to get into a comfy place where you can connect with your own energy. You may wish to imagine yourself within this beautiful bubble of light. And even if you can't see that, which many of us cannot, see that image, imagine what it would be like to feel or experience yourself encircled by this beautiful sphere of light. This light can be any color that feels good for you right now. You may wish to invite in the presence of your spiritual guidance team, ancestors, whoever, whatever is that benevolent guiding force for you, that protective, benevolent force. Ask that they are here with you now to protect you, to help you, and to communicate with you in a way that you can easily understand. Okay. And as always, I'm pulling 3 cards today. If you like, you may wish to pick a number between 1 and 3 to have that card be special to you. Okay. Okay. So I always feel so excited to see like what the cards are gonna be. It's like a surprise. Okay. First card is the Four of Pentacles, symbolized by the Sun in Capricorn. So, and I did pull this reversed. So it has a unique meaning, a certain spin on the typical meaning. So, um, Four of Pentacles is about material power. Four of Pentacles is about our resources, our stability, particularly in often a way that is more practical or financial based. That doesn't always have to be the case. Uh, and the pentacles have a Saturnian quality to them. They're more about the things that we can touch and feel. And I would say, even deeper than that, the pentacles sometimes correlate to our feelings of self worth, self esteem, and that is often intermingled with money or the work that we do. And so the Four of Pentacles is about how we feel secure or not, and our response when we feel insecure, whether this is emotional insecurity, financial insecurity, housing insecurity, etc., etc. This is about how we respond when it feels like things are amiss, and how we try to cultivate this sense of an inner locus of control, an inner sense of power, a sense of being able to root into our own self, whether that is through physical things or through an inner experience. And so that I pulled this reversed, this makes me wonder if maybe kind of two different streams of thought here. Maybe you are feeling uncertain or insecure in some way, or it feels like the future of your stability is uncertain for some reason. It may also mean that this week is about cultivating a sense of security, autonomy, power, and that may involve some more practical components. It may also be working, at a more inner psychological level. This week may be about working with the ways that you respond to feelings of insecurity and how you cultivate a sense of inner power, how you take care of yourself, I think is so much what this card is about. Okay, so we might go back to that. Let's see what else is here. Okay, the Fool is the second card. So the Fool is about beginning. A Fool is so Jupiterian. The Fool is about walking into a new experience. It's about stepping off the edge into something brand new. It's about not knowing what is next, but feeling called, feeling compelled, feeling a pull towards something. The Fool is the very beginning of the tarot, or the very end, depending on when you look at it, because it's a cycle. So ending is the beginning. This is about feeling an inspiration and acting on it. There is also a lot of like, gosh, it's so interesting that we had the Four of Pentacles, which is about security. The Fool is about um, not letting insecurities stop you from pursuing a brand new path. It's about having a beginner's mind, really, is the Fool. And then lastly is the Two of Cups. Two of Cups is symbolized by Venus in Cancer. And Two of Cups is about relationships, love, and healing. Two of Cups in the traditional deck, it has the, gosh, I don't remember quite if it's the caduceus or if it's a different kind of symbol, but it's where there's two snakes or two threads that are crisscrossing each other. And then there's a third thread that moves through the center, or scepter that moves through the scepter, which is a healing symbol. And so, uh, what's happening here? Yeah, so there's something about coming together with people, with a person, with yourself. There is a union here with the Two of Cups. Cups are about emotions and relationships. And so there is a coming together, a union, a sense of healing. Maybe it's not literal with other people. Maybe it's a union within yourself, a coming together within yourself. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm like, what is happening? I think there's something here about possibly not feeling settled, or maybe sometimes the Four of Pentacles, I think, can be like a symbol of constricted or feeling tension in some way, because you're like trying to find stability by hanging on. And sometimes, of course, that is very necessary. Always do what feels appropriate and right for you. So there's something here around stability, security, safety. And then there's a calling to explore, to begin fresh, to begin anew, which is sort of a paradox with the full moon. But I kind of feel this, the Fool feels very Jupiterian to me, feels very Jupiter in Cancer. And then, so out of this exploration, out of this, the Fool is so much about taking a chance. And so it could be emotionally taking a chance. There is something that comes together. There's something unifying. There is a connection. There is a healing component here. So This is your astrology for the week. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I am wishing you a most beautiful week ahead. I'll see you soon. Bye.